Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Well, let's talk heavyweights. Recently in the heavyweight division, Deontay Wilder, who's been going around saying he wants to fight Alexander Povetkin, was unable to reach a deal with Alexander Povetkin, who's his mandatory contender. So, the fight went to a purse bid. And, of course, a Russian promoter won the purse bid. Now, let me just say that I don't believe this fight happens. I don't. Because I believe Alexander Povetkin is the better fighter than Deontay Wilder. And I believe Wilder understands he's going to have major problems, major problems, with Alexander Povetkin's superior, and I mean superior, lateral movement and spacing. Now, he's hearing that he has to possibly travel to Russia. The purse bid was over $7 million. He has to travel to Russia, possibly, to fight Povetkin in Povetkin's backyard, putting not only his title on the line, but putting his unbeaten record on the line. Now, some of the same people who advised Vladimir Klitschko are advising Deontay Wilder. Let me say this. I believe Wilder understands that there are many guys out there who are toward the top of the heavyweight division who he would stand a far greater chance of beating. Both Charles Martin and Anthony Joshua. Joseph Parker. I think Wilder understands that if he abdicates his throne, he would keep his unbeaten record. He could give whatever reason he wants to the press. He could say, hey, I don't trust Russia, or I have a lingering back problem, or, family issues are keeping me from, fighting, or, gee, I don't like drug testing protocol over there. He could give whatever reason he wants. The point is, if he backs out, the boxing public is still going to view him as a fighter with credibility, as a valid opponent. It would give him the opportunity to pick and choose which version of the heavyweight title he wants to fight for. Now, I personally believe that Tyson Fury is far above him. That Tyson Fury fight would really be a referendum on exactly which way Tyson Fury wants to win. Whether Tyson Fury takes holding the belt seriously enough to train seriously for a guy who used to hold a share of the heavyweight title. But I will say that I understand, in a sense, there's less risk for Deontay Wilder in fighting Tyson Fury, who, in my opinion, is the most widely recognized heavyweight champion. There's less risk in trying to climb Mount Everest and failing than there is in fighting, let's say, an Alexander Povetkin, a mountain who isn't viewed as highly as Mount Everest, and failing. In other words, if you're going to lose to the best. Not only that, understand a Tyson Fury-Deontay Wilder fight. Let's say if Wilder were to pick the best heavyweight champion out there. A Tyson Fury-Deontay Wilder fight would net Wilder the widest exposure and the biggest purse. It would be a fight we remember. Legacy matters. Also, As much as I criticize Deontay Wilder here online, I admit openly that I'm a skeptic on some parts of his game. I recognize that Wilder has one punch knockout capability, right? According to some, after Wilder hit Artur Szpilka, Wilder turned to his corner and said out cold as Szpilka was hitting the canvas, right? I don't know if that's true or not, but let's just say that that's the level of punching power in urban mythology, right? Let me say this too. You have a bunch of flat-footed guys in the heavyweight division. Anthony Joshua, Charles Martin, who Wilder, who is a great athlete, might be able to outmaneuver in the ring, right? Understand, Wilder has ring coverage other guys don't have. He can hit you from halfway across the ring. I want people to revisit that Audley Harrison fight, right? Wilder doesn't have to be in your area code to dial you up long distance, right? Against, let's say, a guy like Charles Martin, Wilder conceivably could be outside of Martin's punching range, then could come in, land one good straight right hand, and close the show, right? Anthony Joshua, let's just say, as inexperienced as Wilder is, Joshua somehow is more inexperienced, right? I'm not sure how Joshua would deal with Wilder's length. That fight would be a blockbuster. Let's remember that Wilder has already fought in the United Kingdom. That Audley Harrison fight was in the United Kingdom. If Anthony Joshua comes to the United States, if he beats Charles Martin, he's going to be a media sensation, and that fight would probably fill the new arena in Las Vegas, right? So, Wilder has more lucrative options. One of the most valuable things Wilder has is his unbeaten streak. Let's look behind the curtain. Let's look at Al Haymon. Al Haymon had a fighter. Haymon, of course, according to reports, has a contract with Deontay Wilder. Haymon had a fighter, an unbeaten fighter, who had the middleweight title, Peter Quillin. Quillin abdicated his title rather than fight the guy he was supposed to fight. Quillin abdicated his title, gave up the belt, right, so that he could then pick and choose who he fought. And of course, Haymon was able to then give him a title shot against Andy Lee when that fight ended in a draw. And Quillin didn't get the title. Of course, they were able to give Quillin another title shot against Danny Jacobs, right? My point to you is, here Haymon has a much more valuable title, the heavyweight title, right? I believe people in boxing understand that Alexander Povetkin would be by far, the toughest opponent Deontay Wilder has ever fought. Now that fight would take place possibly in Russia. It's not going to happen. Folks, I'm just going to predict that Deontay Wilder does not sign to fight this superior fighter, right? There are other shares of the heavyweight title out there that are easier to obtain, that might yield bigger paydays, right? Why fight Povetkin when you could fight the winner of Anthony Joshua, Charles Martin, right? Two guys who are more beatable, who have a share of the heavyweight title, who you could promote as a fight against, the current champion and the former champion, right? Why would you take on Povetkin, a better fighter than the other two? Just being blunt here, right? When you could take on the other guys and win a share of the title, and the casual sports fan might not know the difference. right? Why fight Povetkin, possibly lose that fight, and then blow a possible matchup against Tyson Fury? Understand, just because I don't believe Wilder, who is unbeaten, who has a title, is the best today, doesn't mean that he couldn't later become the best as he develops his game. In other words, let's say he fights the winner of Charles Martin, Anthony Joshua, right? Big fight. I'm sure Charles Martin and Anthony Joshua would much rather fight Deontay Wilder than Alexander Povetkin, right? So let's say that fight happens. And let's say Wilder then wins the belt again. Keep in mind, having never lost, right? Then he develops his game where eventually he's able to fight, let's say, a Tyson Fury, right? If he then beats Tyson Fury at that point, he would stand alone atop the heavyweight division. Povetkin would still be out there, right? But at that point then, his people would know, hey, this purse bid's going to be serious, right? We can't be outbid by a Russian promoter. Then there's more money in it for everyone. By not fighting Povetkin, understand Wilder might be able to get more money to fight Povetkin later while protecting his unbeaten streak in the short term. So put me among those, because I believe, and I don't care about, the records and stuff, I personally believe that Alexander Povetkin is a better fighter than Deontay Wilder. That Deontay Wilder is green. That, the early rounds of the Spielka fight, I don't know what fight those judges were seeing. Spielka won several of those rounds against Wilder, right? And Spielka isn't the same level of fighter as Alexander Povetkin, right? By the way, Spielka is going around saying other guys he's fought hit harder than Deontay Wilder, right? So just looking at Wilder in his most recent fight, I'm shaking my head. I just don't see how he would beat Alexander Povetkin, right? The bet I'd recommend there is whatever the odds, Povetkin win the fight, right? That would be your foundational play, hedged with Wilder by KO. Wilder always has a puncher's chance. But I just don't think Wilder takes that fight right now. I think what's going to happen is the boxing public, is going to be fed a lot of excuses by Wilder and Wilder's camp on why Wilder is not going to take the fight, right? Don't expect a contract to be finalized there anytime soon, right? I just believe Alexander Povetkin is too dangerous at this point in their careers for Wilder to fight him. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. Leave your comments for me here online. Let me say this too, and I don't say this lightly. I expect Lucas Browne to beat Ruslan Chagaev, right? I believe Lucas Browne would be far too dangerous for Deontay Wilder to fight. So Wilder's going to have to pick and choose. It's because there's a gap between, reality. The fact that, quite frankly, Lucas Browne and Alexander Povetkin are better, in my opinion, than Deontay Wilder. Anthony Joshua, right? Charles Martin. It's because the public believes more in those guys that I believe you're going to see guys picking and choosing who they fight in the heavyweight division. Let me add this caveat, right? Tyson Fury, Vladimir Klitschko. If I were Vladimir Klitschko, and I'm serious about this, I would talk long and hard with my family, right? I would call up guys like Lennox Lewis. I mean, hell, both guys are Emmanuel Stewart disciples, right? I'd call up Lennox Lewis and I'd say, hey, should I retire, right? Understand, if Vladimir Klitschko retires right here, right, and avoids the Tyson Fury rematch, folks, this is boxing. He could then unretire later, right? He could do something like show up to, let's say, a fight like Joshua Martin, sit in the front row, heckle one of the guys, right? This could be choreographed. You know, the winner of that fight could then say, hey, Vladimir Klitschko, I want you, right? Then Klitschko would have his own short drive back to the heavyweight title, fighting a guy who's much easier than Tyson Fury, right? So if I'm Vladimir Klitschko, I would pick and choose if I wanted to continue my career. Quite frankly, if I'm an old master like Vladimir Klitschko and I've just become a father and I've had a lot of success and I've lost to the best out there, right? Now might be the time for me to ride into the sunset anyway. What you don't want, if you're a Vladimir Klitschko supporter, is a Rocky Marciano-Joe Louis fight, where Joe Louis is on his last legs, he fights a young lion, and gets knocked out of the ring, right? I'm just telling people that there's a reason why Vladimir Klitschko was guarded for most of that first fight against Tyson Fury. It's because if that fight becomes an unguarded fight, if Vladimir Klitschko isn't in his construct and starts to engage in a shootout, the fight could end like Corey Sanders' fight against Vladimir Klitschko. By the way, there was never a rematch between the two, right? It was Big Brother Vitaly Klitschko who then came in and fought Corey Sanders, right? Ask yourself the question, why wasn't there a rematch between those two, right? Vladimir Klitschko and Corey Sanders, right? No group on the planet would be happier to see Vladimir Klitschko throw caution to the wind and try to trade with Tyson Fury than Tyson Fury's own corner, right? So if I'm Klitschko, I mean, Deontay Wilder's not the only one at heavyweight who needs to pick his spots. If I'm Vladimir Klitschko, I'd be looking at Fury and I'd be saying, man, what? Okay, I lost to this guy. Why should I try to fight? Why should I try to climb Mount Everest when there are other mountains in the mountain range, right? With titles, right? Vladimir Klitschko, who's already sparred with Anthony Joshua, must be looking at the heavyweight division, must be scratching his head, and must be saying, you got to be kidding. Keep in mind, Vladimir Klitschko's already sparred with Deontay Wilder, right? Klitschko knows what's out there. As he looks at Anthony Joshua, he has to realize that he's fought, more than a dozen guys who have vastly more experience than Anthony Joshua, right? So look at the heavyweight division. The prediction I'm making in this video is simply that the Wilder-Povetkin fight, in my opinion, won't happen within the next 6 months, right? Forget what you're hearing about purse bids and mandatory contenders. There are other factors at play, such as the preservation of an unbeaten record. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. Leave your comments for me here online. Visit us at gamblersadvisory.com. Just remember, Peter Quillen, unbeaten champion, gives up the middleweight title. Think about it. Thanks for stopping by.